Hello! We're hanging out on a hangout for the first time since like November on a Tuesday night, and that can only mean one thing. It's the Natty Brohs podcast. I'm Zach Brooks, and joined with my special guest tonight, Taylor Cotter. That's
Hello.
her. Cute.
Hello, Natty Bros of the world.
And we were discussing, this is, I think, the first woman on the Natty Bros podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
probably no coincidence that Anthony is nowhere to be found when we have the first woman on the Natty Bros podcast. Uh, and basically, we wanted to talk about Neighbors, and so we were like, let's talk about the movie Neighbors and do it podcast form because I didn't want to write anything about it, but I really liked the movie.
Yeah, talking is much easier than writing.
Yeah, this doesn't want to be like work. I'm not a writer. Yeah.
Yep.
So, if you are new to the Natty Bros podcast, as probably a lot of people listening to this might be,
My fans.
yeah, all of the millions and millions that you bring in.
Yep.
I'm Zach Brooks, and usually I'm joined on this podcast of my co-host, Anthony D'Angelo. Tonight he can't be here, mainly because he wasn't able to see Neighbors in time, but also because he's at a soccer game. But him and I talk about a lot of things from the fan perspective, so going to sporting events and movies and food from the fan or consumer perspective. And we like to do top lists and top 10 lists, and we're thinking there's going to be more top 10 lists coming in the future. And it will not be another 6 months before we do another podcast, so stay tuned. There will be more podcasts coming sooner rather than later. You can follow us on Twitter at Natty Bros. We also have a Facebook page. Follow those things and interact with us so we have things to post. And our website is nattybros.com. And yeah, we do these podcasts like once a week. So let's hop into Neighbors. Well, first, Taylor, do you want to introduce yourself, plug your cool stuff
Yeah,
that
I'll
you do?
do super quick. My name is Taylor. Zach and I know each other from being longtime fans of another podcast called Rob's Podcast. We met each other about a year ago, and he told me all about the Natty Bros. Since then, we've both been doing stuff for Rob's Podcast. Beyond that, I do a lot of improv comedy in Boston.
Oh, man. I don't
More
do
or
any
less.
improv comedy. Except this podcast.
This is
which I
improv.
consider
Yeah,
tons
this is
of
improv comedy right now. Yep.
Oh, yes, and. I know that's the one thing
Yeah.
I know about improv comedy. Yes, and.
That's 90% of it.
And Taylor and I also recap sometimes for postshowrecaps.com, and we just recently recapped Mean Girls in the anniversary of the 10-year, in honor of the 10-year anniversary of Mean Girls. So check that out at postshowrecaps.com to a little plug in there. So we figured we'd start off talking just about Neighbors kind of from a non-spoilery, if you haven't seen the movie yet perspective. Go a little bit on that and then actually dive into the movie, which is where if you haven't seen it yet, you should pause, go see the movie, and then hit play as soon as you walk out of the theater. And then talk about kind of where Neighbors falls in terms of the recent comedies that have come out in the last couple summers and some other, where does this movie fall? Because I'm just going to get it right out there. I really love this movie. Thought it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, were you in a fraternity?
Yeah, that's why I'm wearing my ZBT hat.
Yeah.
I was 3 years in a fraternity, the dorky Jewish fraternity at Michigan State, and it wasn't anything like the fraternity in this movie, really. We were not that cool. But, yes, that's why I broke out my ZBT hat for the first time in, maybe like 7 years. It's been a while.
Well, you have that perspective on it, the fraternity perspective.
Yeah. And I feel like, growing up seeing like Revenge of the Nerds and some of the other fraternity comedies, Animal House, that was definitely a big influence on me when I was like, all right, I'm going to go to a big school and I'm going to be in a fraternity. So I think that had a lot to do with me wanting to do that. And I'm actually going back to school to go to my fraternity reunion this summer. So
Oh, awesome.
I'm going to talk all about Neighbors on there.
Cool. All right, do you want to give a quick summary and then I can fill in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for people who haven't seen the movie, I keep recommending it to people, and they're like, oh, no, that looks stupid. Is that the one where Seth Rogen flies off of his seat into the ceiling? And, it's got Zac Efron in it. I don't want to see that. I hate that guy. But there's a lot more to it than that, I thought.
For sure. So just to give, well, can I ask one question before we get into this? This is not a remake of the Dan Aykroyd film Neighbors, is it?
Oh, I didn't know there was a Dan Aykroyd film, Neighbors. I don't think so.
Yeah. I read this a few weeks ago that I guess there's a Dan Aykroyd Chevy Chase movie called. I may be wrong on that. It might be John Belushi. It's a Dan Aykroyd movie called Neighbors, and it's like a very baseline similar premise. That basically like a family moves next door to another family. I've never seen it, but I was reading about it. Like crazy things happen. Um, and I read originally that this movie was supposed to be called Townies, which doesn't really make sense. But I'm wondering if they named it Neighbors, kind of to get more people to go see it. If they thought it was a remake, or they thought it was a spin-off, kind of like Troll 2.
So,
I'm sure there's other examples.
Troll 2 isn't really a sequel to Troll, though, right? Is that the whole
No,
thing with Troll 2?
Right, it was a completely independent movie, but they named it Troll 2 because they thought people would go see it if it was part of the franchise. So if you didn't hear about this, then I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with the
I didn't hear anything
movie.
about it, and I feel like I've never heard of the movie Neighbors. Like, it's not a famous. If they would have called it Trading Places,
Right.
or like Animal House, or even
Right.
try to tie it in with Animal House maybe, but I don't. I mean, I don't think this was. I think this was original. It was written by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, who wrote and produced the "This Is the End" from last year, which I thought
and
was
super bad.
Did you like "This Is the End"?
I really liked This Is the End.
Yeah, I thought this was better than "This Is the End," but I also really "This Is the End" made like my top 10 list from last year.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. I thought "This Is the End" was a lot more creative. Like it was just it was unlike any other movie I'd seen. But I don't know. Maybe it was just like the time in my life when I saw this movie, because I feel like this movie deals a lot with, in addition to just being two neighbors who feud with each other, it deals a lot with like generational
right.
And
yeah. So just to give the quick summary of the movie, it's about it starts out with a couple who's played by Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne, who have a baby, and they live in this beautiful house in like a suburban college town, it seems like. And then next door to them, the house is for sale, and it ends up being a whole fraternity that buys the house, and the fraternity is led by Zac Efron and Dave Franco, James Franco's little brother. And it's kind of just like, hijinks ensue from there, what you would expect. So you have Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne, who are probably in their mid-30s, and these kids who are supposed to be in their early 20s, partying, drinking, smoking, whatever, and then a couple that's really struggling between, like, being cool and being adult and taking care of their baby and, having a nice place to live. So then, I would say there's probably 4 or 5, like, different kind of things that happen, like, mini stories throughout there until resolution.
lots of good party scenes in this movie. I thought
really, really great.
Well. And
yeah, is there anything else you want? Or go ahead.
No, you go. You were almost done.
I was going to say, do you want to officially put a spoiler warning now, or do you have more that you want to?
Well, the only thing I will say is that the trailers are super misleading. I think that they did a really bad job marketing this movie, because they market it as like a slapstick comedy, and the thing that everybody notices from the trailer is the airbag stuff that Seth Rogen flies off the airbag from his desk chair. And that's everybody immediately thinks that's what this movie is about, and it's not. That's a part of it. I think
it's not a prank war or anything like that.
No, it's really not, and it's about these people learning to coexist together, and there's definitely a lot more to it than that, and I think that's why it really kind of touched me as like a movie about getting older and dealing with getting older and not being the guy in this hat anymore, but the boring guy who goes to work every day as a kid. So, if you haven't seen it, hit pause, go see the movie, and then hit pause again and listen to the rest of this podcast, because we're going to talk about the movie more in depth about the plot and details. So there's your warning. All right. So let's talk about just kind of
Okay,
in
we're
general.
back.
Yeah, we're back. We gave people like 15 seconds.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about this movie just kind of in general. Like, are we having a weird connection?
No, I'm good. Are you?
Okay. Yeah, I thought we were having a weird. My screen kept flashing like the connection was weird. Um,
Okay.
all right, so let's talk about this movie a little bit more in depth. Uh, my biggest gripe with this movie was that these parents who learned that they're happy and satisfied being parents and being adults by the end of this movie ignored the baby for an entire year.
I mean, at least the baby is pretty much the driving force behind everything that they do, which I think is a very smart plot device because I think like okay, like I know a lot of people that are in their late 20s, early 30s, and I think that's a very interesting time because you can meet people who are 30 or whatever. Like, I think this probably ranges anywhere from like 26 to like 38. Like, you can meet someone that's 30 or two people that are 30 that are at completely different points in their lives, you know? And so you meet people that are 30 that are out at the bars and they're partying and they're having fun and they're you know, having the exact same life that they probably had when they were 20 or 22. And then you meet people that are 30 that are married and own houses and have like one or two or three babies and like are on just a totally different path. So I think having this couple that you have Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne, who are very clearly like a fun, cool couple that, you know, had a lot of fun throughout their 20s, but things have changed because they have they have a baby now, so there's actual stakes to what's going on. It's not just like, oh, we can just move or it makes so much more of what happens make sense.
Yeah, and I thought the baby was definitely was the driving force, and they
Hmm.
take the baby monitor, which is there's a lot of jokes about the baby monitor being a weird looking cell phone. And I thought that
Hmm.
was good, but I just felt like throughout the movie they're doing all of these things. They're plotting. They're setting up these guys to cheat on, like cheat with each other's girlfriends and have
Hmm.
all these problems and get on probation. But you don't see the baby very much through the movie, and I felt like by the end of the movie they show the baby again, and the baby now has like dark hair, and I actually thought that was going to
Hmm.
be something that was going to play out, that they were going to realize at the end of the movie, like, oh my god, we were so preoccupied with these kids next door to
uh
us that we forgot about our own kid and like regret that, and that was where they were going to get their
right.
perspective, and that never really played out, and it was just like,
No.
oh, we forgot the baby, like they didn't even
Yeah.
like they ignored it, they didn't even talk about it.
Right. They mentioned like before that party scene, I think they're like, "Oh, we got a babysitter, so everything's good." But like it's really just a throwaway. Um, but can we talk the baby, the actress, I think it's twins that played the baby were so great. Like so good for baby actors. Just super expressive and like really fit right into the whole movie.
I don't know if I ever really noticed baby actors. Like I feel like I'm
But in
always like,
that
it's a baby.
yeah, I thought this was a particularly good baby actor.
I mean, the baby was really good, like even in the first scene when they're
The
trying to have
first
sex
scene,
and the
yeah.
baby's watching them, and that was another scene that I feel like was spoiled a little bit by the trailer. Um, but that went on a little bit more, and um, the lack of romance or like physical romance in their relationship was pretty funny throughout the movie.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think, in general, their relationship is very interesting and not one that you typically see in a comedy movie or really a lot of movies in general. Just like, and I read an article today. Seth Rogen, I guess his wife, who I believe her name is Lauren Miller, she's an actress and a writer too, and I am a big fan of hers. She read the original script where the wife was just kind of like a shrill, like, you know, bitchy comedy movie wife. And I think the best example of the bitchy comedy movie wife is Rachel Harris in The Hangover as Ed Helms' wife.
Oh
So
yeah.
it was just kind of like that sort of trope. And I guess Seth Rogen's wife read it and was like, this isn't real. Like, it's not funny that she's mean. Like, it would be funny if she was into it. And so you get this couple, and like Rose Byrne, who has really just kind of, jumps out of this movie to me as like one of the best, um, and has really like shown herself to be a really great comedic actress, is 100% game for everything that goes on, and it almost is like a buddy comedy movie between a husband and wife, which I don't know if there's anything else like that, at least recently.
Yeah, no, that's true. You do see a really good dynamic between the two of them. Um, and they work together as a team. They get in the fight, like kind of predictably they got in a fight towards the end, and
Yeah.
then she comes back and things work out towards the end. But yeah, they really kind of get each other into mischief, and it's almost like when one of them starts to be like, well, I don't really want to do this anymore. Let's just let this go. The other one gets him back in, and they're like, yes, yeah, let's get back in. They both are kind of dealing with this we're boring parents thing.
Right, and I think that's very real. Like, I think that, and like, not that a comedy movie needs to be super realistic or anything like that, but I think it's really interesting when you see something and you're like, oh, that actually kind of makes sense that they're on the same page, because they actually, like, I think it's unrealistic when movies or TV shows consistently portray people in relationships as so different from one another, because it's like, oh, no, like, they probably have some stuff in common at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, like there has to be something because that drove them together in the first place.
Yeah.
So, does Rose Byrne always have that accent, that thick of an accent? Because I don't remember that from like Bridesmaids.
That was one of my notes too. I she asked her accent in Bridesmaids, and she's also in the movie Wicker Park, which is one of my favorite movies. It's so like it's a kind of a dumb movie, but I like it a lot. And I don't think she had an accent in that, so it's kind of a weird. I guess because her accent is so muted and like not necessarily like an overt Australian accent. Like, I went through the first 20 minutes of the movie like not even realizing it was there.
Oh, really? See, I definitely noticed it in. I'm glad they played it into the story that she was an exchange student, and I think that worked really well too
I agree.
with interacting with the college kids. So
Right.
I enjoyed that.
Definitely.
So
Cool.
And then we had some good cameos in this movie. I thought Lisa Kudrow. I was like, oh my god,
She was awesome.
Yeah.
Normally before I go see a movie or while I'm watching a movie, I'm like constantly checking Wikipedia and being like, who's that, or like figuring out who's in it. And I didn't do that with this movie, so like every single person that showed up was a surprise to me. I had probably only seen the trailer once too. So like
really?
Loved like I was familiar with it, but I just kind of blew it off as like, oh, some dumb movie that I don't really care about. But I ended up changing my perspective. I really, really like Ike Barinholtz, who played the Seth Rogen's buddy from work. I thought he was so great.
Yes, so I had a question about that. And what were those guys?
Mm-hmm.
What was that? Was it Jimmy and his ex-wife? Her name was Paula, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So they were just friends of theirs?
I believe so.
The whole movie, I thought Jimmy was Max, Seth Rogen's character's brother, and Paula was Kelly's sister. And I thought it was really weird. I was like, why would a brother and sister get married? Like, I was trying to figure out if like one of them was related or were they all just friends with each other.
Yeah, I think they were all just friends.
Yeah, and I mean that was kind of strange, but I guess that makes sense that they were like two couples and one of the couples split up, and that's I guess another part of like now you're hitting this age and people have started getting divorced or whatever.
Right. That was one of the funny lines at the beginning. He was like, "Oh man, you're our only friend that has a house and a baby," and he's like, "No, you're divorced." Like everyone's kind of going through their own life journey, and like I think there's so much. I thought that was kind of funny that it's like, oh no, you're giving all this arbitrary weight to having a house and a baby when it's like, oh no, you went through a divorce.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was interesting too because I grew up like right outside of where Michigan State is, And so,
Hmm.
I grew up in like one of those. It wasn't quite a neighborhood where there would be a frat house that would like rent space, but it was pretty close to one of those neighborhoods. And actually, like the first house we lived in definitely was one of those neighborhoods. And so I
Really?
totally understand that, where you would have a neighborhood where there would be students. I don't know if it would necessarily be fraternity housing. I thought that was for
Yeah, that
at
was one
least.
of my questions. Can a fraternity? Yeah, that was one of my questions. Can a fraternity just buy a house? Like I went to school in the city, so it was much more regulated. So we didn't have any fraternity houses or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, we had fraternity houses right in the off-campus neighborhood, um, and but a lot of times it's like a student housing is like houses that students live in is kind of the same,
Hmm.
and it wouldn't be that nice. I felt like that was a really nice house for where
Hmm.
that fraternity lived. But I guess the fraternity has a lot of money; they can fund it. So, um,
Right.
another one of my
Yeah.
questions that was I was wondering about, and that was a big thing I wondered throughout the movie, is like, where are the rest of the neighbors? Yeah, are these really
They
the
show them
only
at the
two people?
beginning. They show them when they're remember the couple's like, oh, we need to get everyone else on our side, and then they walk around and they show that everyone in the fraternity has like done favors for all the different neighbors and like helped the old ladies like go to the grocery store and stuff. So basically, they've bought off the rest of the neighborhood,
Hmm.
which is definitely like unrealistic.
Yeah,
But
exactly. It's like, okay, they brought them off, but then like they're throwing these giant parties, and the neighbors aren't coming over and complaining at all. Um,
right,
I mean, it would have been an interesting dynamic to have another neighbor who kind of joins the fight, and is like,
I agree.
yeah, these kids are pissing me off too. Like, let's get them kicked off campus.
Hmm.
But, um, and I really liked just kind of all of the different ways that they try to get they try to get the fraternity in trouble, and then Teddy and Pete will come up with some plan to, like they make the dildos, which I guess that's a thing. I didn't know
Is
you could
that
buy
a
those
thing? I've
kids.
never heard that
Those
before.
kids. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really in that business of finding out, but it was a great running gag throughout the movie where somebody would have an idea that was just like a phrase. They'd be like
Yep.
bros over hose, and they just like say it over and over again, and then eventually
Yep.
figure out like you're like, is this actually going to turn into something? And then it did turn into a plan. I thought that was great.
Hmm. Yeah. How do you feel about Zac Efron and Dave Franco, Pete and Teddy?
Oh, they were perfect. I mean, I think this is the perfect role for Zac Efron because
Yep.
he was just obnoxious, and people already don't like the guy. I think the only person who would have been like even better in that fraternity is if they could have given Justin Bieber a role. If he would have like poked fun at himself and been in this movie,
I,
that would have been
I
hilarious.
think Zac Efron though, at least to me, I really like Zac Efron in like general, I guess. I can't really point to any roles he's had that I liked. Oh, I liked him in like Hairspray. Um, I think he's super likable, and I think Justin Bieber is much less likable, and that I can really see Zac Efron in this world. And it's kind of funny that like I feel like this is getting kind of generational. So you have like what people used to refer to as the frat pack, which was like Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson and maybe even like Ben Stiller. And those guys are probably in like I couldn't even begin to guess, like probably their late 40s now, so they are kind of like and then there was this new generation. So I guess that was like the early 2000s. You would see those guys in every single movie.
Right.
Then in like the last 5 to 10 years, you started seeing Seth Rogen and James Franco and all these kind of Judd Apatow guys come in, and they like were super everywhere. This is the end. This is like perfect example that all those guys were everywhere. Paul Rudd, and then now it's like, is this the new generation of the frat pack, aptly named because like this was a frat movie, but like and I don't know who else you would put in with these young guys, maybe like Michael Cera, but like guys that are in their early 20s that can make these kind of stupid movies for the next 5 to 10 years.
I don't think the guys who are in the fraternity you're really gonna see um, in any movies. Like like over and over again together. I mean, you had
Well,
Christopher
I think
Mintz. What is it? Christopher Mintz-Plasse? Is that how you say his name?
right, right.
Yeah, and he's
He's in every movie.
right. He's McLovin. He's still McLovin to
Hmm.
me. I think he's always gonna be McLovin.
Yeah, for
And
sure. One of my notes is, or go ahead. Sorry,
oh, I
you're
was just gonna say,
interrupting.
you see him in these movies a lot, but the rest of these guys are kind of new to this scene. I feel like.
Kind of. I mean, Dave Franco has been in a decent amount of stuff, and I think obviously being James Franco's brother is a huge in that he'll be in a lot of movies for a while. And like just off the top of my head, he was in 21 Jump Street and Now You See Me, the movie about the magicians. I think he was on Scrubs for a little while too. So like he's a working actor for sure. And I mean Zac Efron is, an A-lister. So the other guys like Ass Juice and all those other like I don't count them in this world, but I think those two guys are gonna have long comedy careers.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it'll be interesting to see. I feel like Zac Efron and uh, there's other actors that have had the same kind of thing. Like Channing Tatum had the same problem and still sort of does, where it's just like a lot of people, at
Mhm.
least like people that are my age, like guys that are my age, just can't stand them. And I feel like Zac
Yeah.
Efron is like when I told my friends I was going to this movie, like a lot of my friends were like, "Oh, that Zac Efron movie, I'm good." And I feel like people feel
Mhm.
the same way about like Channing Tatum, and I feel like there was a little bit of that about McConaughey for a while, and now that's obviously all gone away because everybody likes McConaughey and everybody loves him now. But um,
Right.
you know,
I think this was a breakout for Zac Efron. I think this will turn things around for him because before this, like, I couldn't even, like, I think Zac Efron was in kids' movies and then he was in shitty, like, Nicholas Sparks kind of movies. And I don't think he ever had a role where he could really show off until this. I think there was too much gratuitous Zac Efron shirtless, which, though I'm not complaining about it, I think it, I think it detracted from the fact that like he's actually funny.
yeah, okay, is he always that ripped, or did he get like especially ripped for this movie? Because I was like, holy crap, that guy's arms are huge.
Yeah, I don't know if he was always that ripped, but he was always like a hot dude. But I think like a hot dude, like when did High School Musical come out? 10 years ago. Like when that movie came out, he was 17. So it's a little different kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
And I thought his character was not nearly as kind of obnoxious and shallow as he could have been in this movie. They really showed how he was struggling with the fact that he was graduating, and like all of his friends were moving on, and he didn't know what he was going to do, and didn't feel like he had left his legacy, and wanted to get up on that wall. So I thought he did a really great job.
right, I think those are the two kind of parallels of growing up is like being 22 and going from college to being a real person, but you still have kind of that leeway, and then being in your 30s and getting married and starting a family, and that
Hmm.
kind of growing up.
Yeah, and then that he then becomes an Abercrombie model, which I mean they must be California
Hmm.
because I've never seen like any kind of like Abercrombie and Fitch like that where the
Yeah, not
guy
like
doesn't
that.
stand shirtless outside.
Right. I thought that was a little weird. Um, on a couple levels, I was confused, and I guess like we can point out. I'm not gonna sit around and point out flaws in a movie that I only saw once. Um, but I thought that was weird. That I was like, oh, like I haven't seen anything like that in a long time. So I was like, do they still even do that? Like I can't believe it. And the other thing is, I don't think Zac Efron is Abercrombie like style. Like when I picture Abercrombie model, I picture like more of a Channing Tatum and like really like like Fabio from Survivor or someone like that. That's just like like waxed and just like totally like perfectly sculpted. And I didn't really think Zac Efron fit that, but I guess whatever. I'm not nitpicking.
I mean, do you think some of that too is like Seth Rogen wrote this movie and was like, oh, all right, what's a cool place for him to work at the end? Like,
Yeah.
and whether that's supposed to be funny that like it's like really dated that he works at Abercrombie, or is like his dated, like dad joke that
Yeah.
this is where he works at. He works at Abercrombie and Fitch because I don't know. I mean, I haven't been in Abercrombie and Fitch since my like like high school, maybe middle school. So
Right, exactly. And like so maybe, like if this takes place in California, then we don't know.
we also don't
Could
know how
be
much
really
money
popular in
Abercrombie and
California.
Fitch paid this movie at the end
Right.
to use their store,
Right.
because we're talking about
Yeah,
it,
for
so it
sure.
worked.
Yep.
Uh, and we talked about the airbag scene earlier, but we're kind of jumping around to the different pranks. But I just thought the airbag scene really destroyed a lot of the realism of this movie.
Yeah, I think there are a couple things, and it's kind of funny. I was thinking about this when we were talking earlier, is that I really like applauded how real the relationship was and like how kind of all the relationships and personal struggles were in the movie, but they're put in this context of like total unrealistic stuff. So like the airbag scene is a really good example. The fact and what I just lost the other one that I was gonna say. Oh, like the fireworks exploding the police car and all this stuff that it's just like, yeah, it's a little too CGI for something that's done so well at building these relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And the fireworks was another one that I really like this movie, but I did have those couple problems with it. And so I'll get to the fireworks in a minute. But the airbags, it just was so ridiculous. Like if that happened in an office building, that would be a huge deal. I mean, they would be investigating, like, why did, like, and like then some other random person, I think, was it actually Jimmy who was shot up in the air by another airbag? Was that the idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
Beyond that, I'm
like,
just like, how does that even make sense? Like, how did they hotwire an office chair? Like, I don't get it.
it just made no sense, and that like the company itself wouldn't be like investigated, and they're just and I guess like there are other times in the movie where it's some of the realness is gone, but I feel like even like when Mac went over and broke the pipe and got the water all in the basement, like that was realistic to me. I could buy that, and I could buy going to a party and getting Teddy's girlfriend to make out with Pete and have sex with Pete. Like I could buy that. All the drug use, I would buy all that. But then we get an hour and a half into the movie and they stole the airbags and put him in his desk chair, and like that he wasn't super injured and that there weren't any repercussions from that, I just thought was really kind of ridiculous. And to top it all off, that's what they used in the preview for the movie, so everybody thinks that's what this movie is like, and it's really like I told everybody, that's the worst part of this movie, is that one scene.
So one of the guys I went to go see the movie with, they said that there was another scene in the preview of like a toilet falling through the floor that wasn't in the movie.
Oh, I didn't see that in the preview.
No, I don't remember. Maybe it was another preview, but I didn't fact check it.
Yeah. The one thing I did really like about the airbags that it did set up was it set up Mac walking around with the broomstick, like poking everything, trying to find the airbag. I thought that was good.
That was good, and I definitely was so nervous that something would happen to the baby.
Oh, man,
they put the baby on the chair.
That would have been so dark.
Yeah, that's way too much for a light comedy film.
Yeah, but speaking of dark, and we talked about this a little bit, then at the end of the movie, they set up like the Chekhov's fireworks, like Chekhov's gun with the fireworks, and then at the end of the movie, we have the fireworks. They actually go off, and Kelly shoots the firework into a police car. And again, like there's no huge investigation. She basically shot a cop.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, I love the cop. I love his name, Hannibal Buress. He's on Broad City and a couple other things. He was a 30 Rock writer and a stand-up. I was so happy to see him in the movie. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff like that you, like, I guess you forgive it, and like I said, like it's just hard to balance, like when you see something you're like, that's so like real and genuine, and versus something that you're like, oh, that's actually problematic.
Yeah, exactly. If the whole movie wasn't set up, pretty much 90% of the movie was really real, then those little things, if it was a movie like some super slapstick movie, then I would buy that, because that's kind of how the movie has been. But this had like a sense of realism to it.
I wonder. So, I was gonna bring up this movie a bit later, but Bridesmaids. You're familiar, right?
Yeah, I saw it once.
So Bridesmaids, they have that whole really like gross scene when they're all like get diarrhea from the restaurant and like
Oh yeah.
it's like very iconic for the movie. I read that that scene wasn't in the original script, and someone made them put it in, like a producer or production company made them put it in because they were like, oh, if this is a Judd Apatow movie, it has to have slapstick gross out humor. It can't just be. And so I wonder if, not that someone told Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, is that his name, that like you have to put this kind of stuff in, but maybe it's part of what makes like a successful comedy movie. Like, how much did you say it made? $87 million.
87 million, and looking at the site, the budget was like 18 million. So
Yeah.
we made a
So
ton of money.
right, and I think if you think a lot of people even will go see a movie if they think it looks kind of dumb and slapsticky. So like to just put in one or two of those unrealistic scenes probably puts a lot of butts in seats at
Oh
Neighbors.
yeah, I mean that's true. I just feel like for a
Yeah.
movie that for the most part the humor in it seemed a lot smarter than the trailers let on.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess that's how they get the money for it, but uh,
Yeah.
I just would have liked to have seen them not go that route, but
Mhm.
it worked. It got them
Yeah.
money. Uh, so any other kind of big parts of the movie that you wanted to touch on? I really liked how they set up some clips, like when they're calling the radio station and saying they're calling as different celebrities, which I guess that's not super realistic, but like Barack Obama would call a
It
super
was
college radio
funny.
station. But
That
I
was
loved when
super.
I loved when Mac was like, oh, "It's Julia Child," and did the Julia Child impression, which I can't even attempt. But
Yeah, oh my gosh. That I thought that whole thing was great. There was a lot of improv throughout the movie, and I read that the last scene with Seth Rogen taking off his shirt was improvised and that kind of stuff. And I think when you work with those kind of people, that's just what happens. But what did you think? And if we don't want to get into this, we don't have to. What did you think about what's his name, Jimmy, making like a not? I wouldn't even go so far as to call it a rape joke, but the punchline of his joke was rape in about what it was like.
what was
I
the
think it
joke
was
that he said? I'm trying to
I
remember
think
what
it
that
was
was.
so he said Mac was saying it up and he was like, "What's the thing that always gets fraternities kicked off
Oh
campus?"
yeah,
And Ike Barinholtz's character, he's very dumb in the whole movie, but very sure of himself in this moment, is like rape. And
yeah.
Mac is like, no, hazing
It's
scandal.
like, oh my
And
god, why would you say that?
yeah, I know. And like I looked this up today because I did think that was a funny joke. And it really like I was like, oh man, I think this is funny. Is this problematic? Like I get very nervous about that kind of stuff. So I went online today and read an article with Ike Barinholtz before I made an official decision on whether it was okay for me to think this joke was funny. And he seemed very self-aware of it and was like, this isn't, it's not a joke about rape, it's a joke about how dumb this guy is and like how sure of himself he was. So I like not that's a discussion for another podcast. Maybe you and Anthony can dive into that one.
Yeah, probably not.
but I thought that was at the very least a creative comment.
I mean, I thought for the most part, like I said, I thought the humor was really smart in this movie, and I just, in
Yeah.
general, I laughed a lot out loud watching this movie. And I feel
Mm.
like a lot of times I'll watch a movie and I'll laugh to myself, or I'll be like, oh, that's funny. But to actually, and I don't know if it's sitting in a theater, I feel like I laugh more out loud when I'm in a theater with a bunch of other people laughing. So that probably had a lot of impact on it. But
Right.
I just remember, I feel like I didn't stop laughing for an hour and a half. And that's why, like, walking out of that movie, I texted you. I was like, all right, we gotta do a podcast on this movie. 'Cause
Yeah,
this is
I was
hilarious.
like,
It's
oh, I
great.
barely, yeah. No, I definitely now I regret bringing up a rape joke because I don't know how many listeners you have.
Yeah, we're not endorsing. We're definitely not endorsing
No.
that.
No,
We're
on any
we're
level.
we're looking at it from a is it a funny joke perspective, and it's a joke that's in the movie, and we're just analyzing it. That's all.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Um, but there is all the hazing stuff, and they try to get Ass Juice, and I thought Ass Juice was the best nickname because being in a fraternity, everybody gets a fraternity nickname.
What
And
was yours?
it was Potato Head. It was Mr. Potato Head. Or Potato Head, and I got like a Mr. Potato Head doll, and I don't even remember the context around it. But yeah, I mean that, like, you always get like a stupid one, but in my fraternity we got them late. We got them like after we were done with our first semester, and the fraternity I was in actually didn't do any hazing, which was why I joined it. I didn't want to do the hazing and any of that crap, but it was just kind of a fun group of guys to like hang out with and drink and watch sports and play video games together. But you do have like the initiation ceremonies and stuff, and then at the end of that was when we all got our nicknames.
Okay.
But I don't think we had any that were like ass juice. I don't think any that were that disgusting. And I can't even remember a lot. I mean, it's really sad. It wasn't that long ago, but I cannot remember any of them.
Yeah.
But, I thought this movie really there's Ass Juice, and I'm trying to remember some of the other ones, but
I think wasn't there like Shaggy and Scooby? It was like Shaggy, Scooby, Ass Juice.
Yeah, there was Shaggy and Scooby. Yeah, that was really good. And like I love that they tied in like the scenes, and he's like having flashbacks to being like his pledge semester, and like getting his face put in somebody's ass and stuff. I thought it was great.
Mm-hmm.
And then they thought they bought him off with a whole bunch of breakfast and shakes and pancakes. Or they thought
that was really, really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like actually in that moment with Ass Juice, you really do learn that Teddy is a good person. Like up until that moment, it's not really clear, but then like when when he can tell that Ass Juice is upset, he takes him, to the side and is like, hey, like, I care about you, blah, blah, blah. And so, I'm saying, Teddy is a good guy to have around.
Yeah, it was great watching them, and they're, like, watching the feed, and they're just like, no, stop, no! I thought that was fantastic.
So we talked about this a little, but I wanted to know where you put this movie among some of the other kind of comedy romps of summers past.
All right, so what does that include? That includes, like, Hangover? We go all the way back to Hangover?
Yeah, here. I have a list, and you can tell me if you think this is better or worse.
All right.
And you really like this movie. So I'll tell you what I think, too, because I don't think I rank it as highly as you do. But let's see. So better or worse than Hangover? 1.
I think it's better. I'm not a big Hangover fan.
I think Hangover 1, at the time it was put out, was pretty much a perfect movie. I didn't even see Hangover 3, but Hangover 2 was terrible. And in the world now, if Hangover 1 came out today, you would be like, this is not funny, and not, like, who are these guys? And, like, it would not, I don't think it would read as well, but I loved Hangover 1 when it first came out.
I mean, I liked it. I definitely did. I just think this one, I walked out of this one having enjoyed it much more.
Yeah.
And I also think when I saw Hangover 1, I'd seen a lot more movies around that time. I feel like I don't see as many movies anymore as I used to. So when I do see like a good movie, it's just like a very pleasant surprise.
Do you think that this was better or worse than Bridesmaids?
I mean, I gotta say better than Bridesmaids. I'm not really the market for Bridesmaids, but I also I don't know. Bridesmaids was good for what it was, but I mean, it's not really my cup of tea.
Yeah, it's all I think I am the market for Bridesmaids, and I still didn't love it. So yeah, I would say probably slightly better than Bridesmaids. Did you see, this one is a weird one I put on the list. Did you see the movie The Internship?
I actually wanted to, because Wedding Crashers is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
But I didn't see The Internship, and
it was horrible.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like I missed much.
No, I watched it on demand or something not that long ago. This was definitely a better movie than The Internship. I think that will be clear. This one's interesting. Ted.
I really liked Ted, actually.
I really liked Ted, too.
I don't think This Is the End, or not This Is the End. What's the one that the Ways to Die in the West? The one that's coming
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think that looks like it's going to live up to as good as Ted was.
No.
I would put Ted slightly below this movie, only
Mhm.
because I thought the first half of Ted was really strong, and the second
Mhm.
half was really kind of weak.
Yeah, I really like Ted. I would say it's hard to say better or worse with Ted because I think Ted is also like probably a lot dumber than this movie. But I Ted is like it definitely has like gets points for being creative and different.
Well, and
Um,
Ted's got the whole Boston tie, so I'm sure that's why you like
yeah,
it.
so yeah, I definitely liked that. So what about did you see We Are the Millers?
No.
Okay, I would put this certainly above We're the Millers, but We're the Millers and This Is the End, which is the last one on my list, were really the only two real comedies like this that I think came out last summer. That kind of
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some comedies from the last year or two.
there
Um,
aren't as many as there used to be.
I mean,
I
there
don't.
was The
It doesn't
World's
feel like
End,
it.
but that doesn't feel like the same type of
That's
humor as this.
different. Yeah.
I mean, let's just look at Paul Rudd movies because I feel like Paul Rudd is. Oh, what about This Is 40? Does that?
This is 40. It's actually not too different because This is 40 is very coming of age, but I almost think of that. That's not. I almost put that in a different realm than these because it's not as. It's not really funny. Like it has jokes in it, but it's not like the whole premise of the movie is funny.
Yeah, no, it's not a comedy the whole way through. I really like this. This Is 40 though. I
Hmm.
would put that pretty high, and I think I don't know if I would put this higher than This Is the End. They're really close. I feel like this. I was more interested in the story of this than I was in this. Like the story of This Is the End, I was kind of wasn't that into, but I really liked the humor in it.
Yeah. That's fair. I think This Is the End was super creative, and I kind of like anything that lets you kind of see into a world of comedians or actors or anyone really that like I felt like that was a movie by them for them, like really from their perspective on how things would go down, and I just kind of like that. It's kind of like a secret window into their world.
Yeah,
So
no, I
that
thought it definitely was. I'm curious. I know they portrayed like the actors obviously a lot different than
yeah, for sure.
real life, but uh, what about Superbad? Is that going too far back?
That's pretty far back at this point, but we can talk about it.
I feel like Superbad is one of the only ones I might rank higher than this.
I'm a big fan of Superbad. What was the other one I was considering putting on the list? Oh, Pineapple Express.
Yeah, that's one I am not a fan of Pineapple Express.
I don't
Most
really
people
like it.
are, but
Yeah, it's not one of
um,
my favorites by any means.
yeah, I'm just looking at Seth Rogen movies that have come out recently to see if we're missing
Hmm.
any. I mean, obviously he was in Knocked Up, but that's going real far back. I feel like.
Yeah, and I think that's more defined. It's hard to say like better or worse than Knocked Up or 4-Year-Old Virgin or those movies that kind of started the Judd Apatow era.
Yeah. Oh, he's in 50. I forgot about 50-50. That was not on this level at all, though, really. But I like
Right.
50-50.
I liked it too. I only saw it once though.
Yeah, I only saw that once. So,
Yeah, I
well, all
don't
right. So
really.
what? So what do we got? I have this number 2 behind Superbad, and you have this what number 3?
I think so because I like Ted better. I like This Is the End better. And I liked Hangover better. And I don't know about Superbad. We'll see. I wasn't keeping good track of where we put this. It's also not an exhaustive list, but
No. What
you
about
put
this?
this as
What
your.
about this compared to other fraternity movies?
I don't have probably the biggest lexicon of fraternity movies, so where would you rank it?
I mean, I don't think it's better than Revenge of the Nerds, and probably not better than Animal House either. Even though
Right. I
I
mean,
don't
they're
like Animal House as
classic.
much. Yeah, I don't like Animal House as much as most people, but I mean that's a classic. You can't really compare.
Yeah. Are there
It's
any?
probably not better than Old School either, because
Oh man, yeah. I don't. I kind of forgot about Old School.
Old School brought
Um.
me gold.
Yeah. Have there been any real fraternity movies since then?
Since Old School,
Yeah.
um, I don't think so. Not that I mean I can't really remember any off the top of my head. So I'm sure there are some.
Yeah, there's a decent number of sorority movies that come out every once in a while, but um, uh, recently there was a movie 21 and Over. That's not, yeah, I never
I
saw
didn't see
that.
that. What about 21 Jump Street?
Yeah.
Does that make your list?
Um, it's hard because it's hard to. I wasn't really looking at a list. I was jumping around, trying to remember stuff that had come out. And there are obviously like a lot of comedy. There's always comedy movies that come out every summer. It's hard to tell like what was really popular and what wasn't. Um, 21 Jump Street I liked. I wasn't in love with it.
I thought it was. I mean, it was another one that I was very pleasantly surprised by, but not. It wasn't nearly as good as this.
Yeah, and the one thing I actually loved in 21 Jump Street, Dave Franco's character and like the kids in high school and how they were supposed to be cool because they were like environmentally conscious and like didn't smoke, and that to me was such a creative part of 21
Oh yeah,
Jump
that was really good. I'm curious to see
Yeah.
what the well, I guess that the sequel is going to be Fraternity movie, so we'll have
Oh,
another one to
there you
add to the
go.
list.
Cool.
So, well, any
Awesome.
last thoughts on Neighbors? I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything.
I thought, and something I rarely notice or pay attention to, cinematography was great, lighting and like how colorful everything was, and like if it was like a party, like all the lighting of the party felt very awesome. So
Yeah, I
if
really
that's
love the party scenes, especially the party scene where Kelly is trying to get Teddy's girlfriend to sleep with Pete. I thought that
Yeah.
that like when they do the dance off and then he's like pointing and Teddy just won't like look, and then he finally gets him to see it, and he like runs upstairs. The relationship between Pete and Teddy was really interesting. I thought Pete was an interesting character.
Yeah, for sure. I thought they were both really like well like fleshed out, thought about like their backstories and that kind of thing. So
Did you
it
know
was
it's
great.
fleshed out and not flushed out?
Did I say flesh or flush?
No, you
I
said
think I said
fleshed.
flesh. I
I recently learned this. I didn't know
it
that was a thing.
I did know this, but I have said both.
Yeah. Well, apparently it's fleshed if you're like elaborating on something, and
Okay.
fleshed if you're flushing something.
Okay. Makes
Which
sense.
wouldn't
Good to
happen
know.
when the toilet falls through the
No, I have to
ceiling.
double check on that and see if that was real.
Yeah. But you said fleshed. That was why I
I
thought of
said
it.
fleshed. We're good.
I just want people to walk away from this podcast learning something, and so if they've learned
Yep.
that you say fleshed instead of flushed, I feel
Yep.
like I've done that part.
For sure.
So
So overall, we recommend this film, especially because what else are you gonna see?
yeah, it's good. So
Yeah.
hopefully that you enjoyed the film and enjoyed this podcast. If you are listening to this podcast or have just listened to it and want to tweet at us, the Natty Bros Twitter handle is at Natty Bros. Anthony and I both manage that. My personal Twitter handle is at BrooksZA, and Taylor's Twitter handle is at Taylor Cotter. Right?
Yes.
Yes, good. Got it. I
Yes.
But yeah, hopefully we can recap some more movies throughout the summer
Yeah.
and keep going. So if there's something you want to see too, tweet at us, and maybe that gives us a reason to go see it. I am really excited to see Godzilla. I'm going to go this weekend for sure.
I'm sure you can do that with the post-show recaps, bros.
Yeah, I think they've got something planned. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what the plan is for that, but Godzilla and of course I'm like super pumped for X-Men next week.
Yeah.
So
And
nothing funny that's coming out that I want to see really bad.
to plug some of Zach's other work, he did a podcast the other day on the top 10 superhero movies of all time with all the guys at Post Show Recaps.
Yeah, at post show recaps, I think is the Twitter handle. Or is it at PS recaps? I'm
I
blanking.
think it's at Post Show Recaps.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually I always plug those on my own Twitter too, so you can follow me. And Anthony and I are going to start being back with some more Natty Bros podcasts that you won't have to have seen a movie to have listened along with. We'll be doing some lists, so if there's different things you want us to rank from our, obviously expert perspective, let us know. And otherwise, anything else on Neighbors before we close the book?
All good on Neighbors.
All right, YOLO.
All right, YOLO.